Hey nerds, Todd Simmons coming back at you with a little more Toddomation. So if you just finished the first video in the series, you're at the screen that's on my screen right now, the ContainerLab showing OrbStack. So the next part that we're going to move into is how to link or mount a drive that you have on your local device into OrbStack. And it's actually really, really simple using VS Code. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my VS Code here. And I've got a brand new window here. And what we want to do first is install an extension. In the extension that we want to install, we just want to do a quick search. And it's going to be, if I can type it right, it's going to be Remote Explorer. And you can see it pop up right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. So on the Remote Explorer, this is going to allow us to SSH to the OrbStack virtual machine that we created. So I'm just going to click Install. All right, it's now installing. Over here on your menu, you'll see something new, and it's this Remote Explorer right here. So what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to SSH or create a connection. This is somewhat like what we did on the Codespaces lab where I did the VPN connection, but in this case, it's actually completely controlled inside our VS Code here. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and drop this for now, okay, is we're going to connect to Orb. Now, here's the really cool thing. When you install Orb and you start that VM up, it starts up in your system and VS Code should recognize it automatically. So down here on the bottom, you'll see the greater than and less than symbol. And this is the remote window or open a remote window section, which is what we want to do. So when we click on that, we want to connect to host. Now yours might say just remote SSH or something like that. If it doesn't say exactly connect to host, it might say SSH, remote SSH like it does here. When we click on that, your device is automatically going to recognize the Orb. I didn't do anything to create Orb. It did that on its own when you installed it onto your system. So when we click on this, now notice it doesn't say ContainerLab. It's not the name of the VM that we created. This is literally connecting to OrbStack. Earlier in the previous video, when I said if you have multiple Linux machines, you want to be careful here. You want to mark one default. That's the reason, because it's going to set the connection to Orb, and it's going to connect to the default connection. Now, if you only have one, which is the ContainerLab VM that we set up specifically using the Trixie version of Debian, it'll just automatically connect to it. So when I click on Orb, there it goes. It says setting up, downloading the VS Code server, and now we actually have a connection. So this old window is not doing anything anymore. So I'm just going to close it. Okay. So on this window, you'll notice down here, the SSH is now set to Orb. It is absolutely connected to Orb. So we should be able to view the Orb. So if I open up a terminal at this point and I say new terminal, okay, notice it's T Simmons at ContainerLab. This is our VM that we just created, and I can double check that by saying CLab, just like we did at the end of the last video, version, and it's running. So at this point, we installed the extension to be able to SSH, right? Specifically this extension, which is the Remote Explorer, right? And we can see that Orb is connected, okay? So at this point, if you opened up that terminal window, right, this is the same terminal window that we used when we were in the previous video, when we clicked on terminal, and then it brought it up and we actually installed CLab. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create a local directory that we're going to mount to. And this is a really important step. So I'm going to pull up my Finder here, and as you can see, it's still in downloads. Now, what I want to do is I want to create a folder very, very close to my actual account. Okay, so I'm going to come in here to T Simmons. The reason being, if you mount, say, downloads or documents or a folder that has a lot of subfolders, it's going to have to load all of those folders and subfolders into your VM, which is going to take up memory. So even if you have 32, 48 gigs of RAM, if you download this or if you mount the drive of documents or downloads, which is what we're fixing to do, we're just not going to do it in downloads or documents, it takes up a tremendous amount of RAM. So if you're already RAM constrained, doing so might even start to disconnect your SSH session from your OrbStack, or specifically from our CodeSpaces VM at this point. So if you start seeing a bunch of errors that say cannot connect, it's probably because the drive that you mounted just has too many files in it, and it's taking up so much memory that it can't maintain the connection to that VM. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to actually create a labs folder, right? So from your home directory, wherever it is, mine is T Simmons, right? I would recommend you just do File, New Folder. Okay, I'm not going to create the new folder because I already have my labs folder. It's here, okay? But create a folder that's called labs or something like that, okay? Once you've created that folder, I'm going to give you a link to my repo that's actually going to have the topology file, the init files, or the init config files for you to make it a little bit easier. And I'll provide you a link so you can actually go to my repo and grab that off of GitHub. So once you create the labs folder, that's where we want to start. Okay. After we have that folder, we can just minimize our Finder application. Okay. And we come back to our VS Code. Notice we're still connected down here to our SSH, to our Orb device. So then we want to come up here to our Explorer extension. And notice now it says connected to remote. That's very important. If you don't see connected to remote, you're not in the right, you haven't got this SSH Orb done. So if this just says open local folder or something like that, you need to make sure that your SSH to Orb down here is actually working. If you're having problems with that, you can't get it to work, drop me a comment. Maybe I can help you out, or just maybe start that first video over. But as you can see, we do have connected to remote in our VS Code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this open folder. Now notice it says home T Simmons 8. Now that can be a little confusing because the name of my computer is T Simmons 8, but it's not home T Simmons 8. That's our directory here. So if I come in and I look at our terminal, right, and I do pwd, by the way, pwd, print working directory inside Linux, it says I'm in home. So because I'm connected to the remote computer, when it says open folder, it just assumes I want to open a folder on my Linux VM, but I don't. So I'm going to backspace, and you don't have to backspace. You could, select it if you wanted to, but we want to leave that / in there because now it's actually going to read from our local directory. Now, what you don't want to do is click on this show local, because then that's going to open up a local folder. It's not going to mount it the way that you think that it would. So don't click on the show local. I made that mistake when I was first setting all this up. So from here, we just want to start typing users, and it will start to look at your local folder at this point. So you can see I can just select users. Now it's actually in my Mac. So I can click on T-Simmon 8 here, and then I can just scroll down and I can find my labs directory. From here, I just click OK. Now, what it's done is it's actually mounted that from my Mac into my Linux VM that's running CodeSpaces for me. Now notice it changed to T Simmons at ContainerLab. So I'm still I'm still connected to that VM, but now it says users T Simmons 8 and then labs. So it mounted my labs directory, and just that labs directory, and I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to do an ls, which is just going to show me the contents of my directory. Well, actually, I'm going to just do a pwd again. Now you can see I'm in users, T-Simmon 8, and then labs. And then I can do an ls space -al, and it's going to list the contents. Now, these right here, you can see this Arista directory that's listed. That's the file that you're going to get, or the folder that you're going to go get from my GitHub, to be able to have the topo file and everything that I'm going to show you how to use here. So you're going to want to take that Arista folder that I'm going to share with you, and I'll link it here in the video from my GitHub, and you'll want to drop it inside this particular folder on your Mac or your Windows device. And because it's mounted, it'll automatically show up in the VM. So it's pretty cool. Just to verify that we're still there, even though we're seeing the files that are local to my Mac now, we can still do the CLab and do the version. Notice I'm still in ContainerLab, okay? Or I can do the Docker, and I did the -- version, right? And you can actually do Docker -v if you want. It just depends on how you like to do that. And now what we've done is we've mounted our local drive. And remember, don't use My Documents. Don't use Documents. Don't use a folder path that has a lot of nested folders already in it, because it's just going to cost you RAM. And if you're already, low on RAM for this, it's probably going to make it to where it doesn't actually work anymore. Okay. So once you're at this particular point, you've mounted your drive. You have your CLab, so that way we can have the files on our local device and we don't have to keep putting them in that VM, which means when you want to edit, when you want to make changes to it, you're making it on your Mac inside VS Code, and you're not having to always transfer it over, which is one of the reasons that I created this lab, right? Is so we're not going and getting information from GitHub and downloading and trying to make those particular changes. So the one thing that I will tell you, if you haven't got your Arista CEOS instance yet that you've downloaded from arista.com, you're going to need that next, because we're going to use that in the next lab. That's going to be in our images. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I can't provide you that particular file because of the copyright associated with those files from Arista. I want to make sure that, you're agreeing to their terms of service in the same way that I agreed to their terms of service. And we're only using those files in the way that Arista intended us to use them. So if you don't have your CEOS version, right, jump onto Arista, look at the other videos that I have, and I'll link that video in here to show you how to go get those. But a previous video gives you a complete walkthrough on how to set your Arista account up and how to download those files. So hopefully you're enjoying the videos. This is number 2. This was a quick one. And if you're enjoying them, like, subscribe. I certainly appreciate that. It does make a difference. And the next video coming up is going to show you how to take that CEOS file, create a Docker image. I actually did all that for you in the GitHub Codespaces labs using a shell script. So if you haven't gotten that, go ahead and grab it. Then I'm going to show you how to actually create the Docker image from that we're going to use to load into ContainerLab. So until the next video, talk to y'all later, nerds. Bye.